Welcome to Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, the local minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ, and we're located at 7800 Central Avenue in Landover, Maryland. Today, I would like for us to continue our series on finding the right person. Many times people will say, well, I'm looking for Mr. Right, or I'm looking for Mrs. Right. But the greater challenge becomes, how do you find that person? What are the foundational instructions that you have received from family, from church, from all sources to say, I know what I'm doing as I seek this person who I'm hoping to spend the rest of my life with? Well, today let's talk about, who are you? Who are you to you? In order to properly find the right person, I think a great place to begin is always with self, to make sure that we know properly who we are, not to the other person, but who are we to ourselves. I think it's imperative that as individuals, there is a looking in introspection before we can reach out for whatever we're looking for. So today, let's talk about the importance of raising the question honestly, who am I to me? And with that, the responsibility of looking into myself to answer that question. You won't find the answer to that question seeking others. In order to find out who am I've got to first look inside of me if I'm going to go out looking for Mr. or Mrs. Right. What's inside of you? It's a fair question. What would a person get from you within a relationship? This is a question that only the individual can answer, not the external individual, but this is an answer that must come from you. What would a person get from you within a relationship? How would you unpack yourself, not before others, but before you? In the privacy of you, nobody is watching, nobody is listening but heaven. How would you unpack yourself? When you unpack yourself, what do you see? What do you hear? Historically, what is the self-destructive sacred pain that you carry? You carry wherever you go. So what is the self-destructive, sacred, or holy pain that you carry with you wherever you go? And you know at some point it's going to show up. It always does. This is the way I think one can better self-examine what's inside of them. What would a person get from you within the relationship? How would you unpack yourself before yourself? And historically, what is the self-destructive, sacred pain that you typically carry with you wherever you go? And at some point, you know it's going to show its ugly head. Let me give you a Bible story that I think teaches this better than I could ever research it. There's a woman by the name of Hagar, and she is a handmaid, but conception brought out the worst in her. Now, what you'll discover is Hagar has been with Abram and Sarah for at least 10 years. And they've never seen this side of Hagar before. But once she conceives, it appears as if something that was already in her, that had been in her at least 10 years, showed up. Genesis 16, verse 1. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress, Sarai, with contempt. Well, what does the word contempt mean? Now she's lightly regarding her. Now Hagar is acting trifling. Now Hagar is making fun, not taking Sarai serious. Now Hagar is getting in the face of Sarah as if she's her equal. We don't see those behaviors prior to Hagar conceiving. Where does this come from? Does it come from her being now pregnant? Or were these some things that were already inside of her that were festering? When you look at the situation that Sarai is in, she's now become a surrogate mother. Well, surrogate mothering meant bearing a child especially in the Middle East. I'll show you a story in just a second in Genesis chapter 30 that dealt with Jacob and one of the handmaids. But it was a practice that was known. Surrogate mothering involved being the female who gives the other male as a substitute for yourself. So you have Sarai in this case, the female, but she gave Abraham another female, Hagar. But Hagar is given in the same sense that we talk about a woman being given to her husband in marriage by the father or the mother. So Sarai basically takes the back seat and she gives Abram a new wife. But the new wife is a substitute for her. And it's for a designated purpose for a designated time. The purpose was to get pregnant. And the time span was to be 9 months after inception and after conception. And after she conceived, then all of the responsibility would transfer over to Hagar. That was a fairly common practice. Now, some of the raunchiness of it in our time that they did not consider that raunchy was what I alluded to earlier from Genesis chapter 30 and verse number 3. The text says very clearly that Rachel will say, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go in to her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that I also may have a child by her." That's an interesting order for a woman to give to another woman. Go in, she's telling her husband. Go in to her. What does that mean? I want you to be as intimate with her as you would be with me. Because as you are being intimate with her, you are actually being intimate with me. She's my substitute, and she has my blessings, and you have my blessings. So she has instructions to treat you as I would treat you sexually. And I'm also empowering you as my husband to treat her as you would treat me sexually. Be intimate with her. Be passionate with her. Because the objective is insemination, conception. And Rachel's message to Jacob is, do it with my blessings. The message to Bilhah is, do it with my blessings. Well, the same is true in the Genesis 16 text. Sarah is saying to Abram, do this with my blessings. And to make sure there was no misunderstanding about whose child that was going to be. In this ancient culture, whether it was Sarah or whether it was Rachel, the wife that gave the consent for it to happen was present. And she actually was there. And the female actually would sit on her knees, or she was there to embrace the female that her husband was embracing, so that she could witness from her husband to the recipient woman, this took place. Once Hagar became the recipient of that, her whole demeanor changed. Conception brought out the worst in her, but it was already in her. Hagar had been taken from her home country and family. You don't think that created some feelings? Hagar had to live in the reality that she may never have an opportunity to have her own family with her own people because of what Sarah had done. Sarah had taken her away from her family. Maybe Hagar was frustrated because of the servant role she was in. And day by day, for years, having to observe Sarah and Abraham enjoying marriage, while at the same time, she had to pretend like she delighted in the happiness that was apparent between Abram and Sarah. And yet she could have been bitter on the inside. She's happy. He's happy. And I'm miserable because I'm away from my people. And the joy that she's embracing, I'll never be able to embrace it. But I can't show my frustration. So although I must always wear a smile, I wonder if there was something inside of Hagar that was saying, I'm glad you can't have a child. Now, what this situation does, it helps Hagar find out what she's made of. It helps Hagar wrestle with, how do I handle hurt? How do I handle my own anger? How do I handle joy? How do I handle disappointments? See, this conception situation will bring out the worst in Hagar. So with Hagar, now she's got to wrestle with, what type of wife would I really be for someone? Well, come back tomorrow and we will develop this lesson with even greater detail. Because on the surface, it appears as if innocent Hagar, mild-mannered Hagar, would just be the perfect wife for someone. But already we see Hagar acting in contempt. And we're going to see some other attributes of Hagar. And that's why I want us to wrestle with, if we're looking for Mr. Right, if we're looking for Mrs. Right, have we first looked into ourselves to find out, well, what do I really bring to this relationship? And oftentimes it's through our own crises. It's through our own hurts, our own disappointments, that we really discover what we're really made of. And what this story does, at least with Hagar, it helps us understand, wow, this little servant girl, when you push the wrong button in her, some bad things show up. I'll see you back in class again tomorrow. Don't be late and don't skip